One of the first things that you're going to notice when you arrive in Asia is that everybody is riding a motorbike or a scooter. In fact, in Vietnam alone, there's 45 million registered motorbikes, with over 5 million motorbikes just in Hanoi. Riding is one of the best ways to see Asia, travelling under your own steam on your own timetable beats sitting on a bus for 8 hours any day of the week. With your own bike, you're able to visit places off the tourist trail and get a more authentic and cultural experience than you would otherwise get. The sights, the smells, the sounds. Riding through Asia allows you to completely immerse yourself in the best that it has to offer. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name's Rory and my wife Casey and I make travel videos through Southeast Asia. We've spent the last 7 months riding 9,000 kilometres through Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia on some of the best and some of the worst roads that Southeast Asia has to offer. In this video we're going to talk about whether you should ride in Asia, and if you do decide to, what practical things you might need to know to have a safe and successful holiday that you're going to remember for the rest of your life.
It's a simple fact that riding a motorbike in Asia is awesome fun, and if you can do it, we definitely highly recommend you do it. We've loved our time on the bike while we've been riding through Vietnam. But there are some things to consider before you decide if that's what you do want to do. You see, riding a motorbike anywhere in Asia is very dangerous. In just Vietnam alone, 28 people die every day on the roads. Now when you consider that a lot of people who come across here that are backpackers or tourists that ride are probably fairly inexperienced as well, you can see that that can add up pretty quickly to be quite a dangerous recipe. So let's talk about whether you should ride a motorbike. Now before you consider whether you should actually ride a motorbike, the first question should be, can I actually ride? Now, it sounds like a bit of a dumb question, but if you've never gotten on the back of a motorbike before, then Southeast Asia is probably not the best place to learn. I'm not going to tell you that you can't do it, but just really seriously consider the risks. So we've seen a lot of tourists that have come over and have jumped on the back of the bike and clearly have no riding experience. And when you consider that there's a whole bunch of tourists that do die each year riding on the roads here, mainly due to inexperience, then is it really worth the risk if you don't have that experience? Now, another thing that you need to consider is the actual legalities of riding over here. Technically speaking, you do need a local license to ride here, and if you're caught riding without one, you could face fines from the police. But that's not even the worst case. If you have an accident and you're riding unlicensed in Southeast Asia, chances are your insurance isn't going to cover you. What that can mean, if you have a serious accident and you're injured, then that means that you could be out of pocket for potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars if you need to be medevaced back home. An absolute worst case scenario, you could actually kill or injure a local, and that will result in some serious jail time in a Southeast Asian prison. So the number one thing in terms of safety that you have control over while you're riding the bike is your personal safety gear. Now, you see a lot of backpackers that are riding around and they're wearing shorts and t-shirt and thongs, and we have been known to do that, especially when we're just doing short little trips around town. But while you're going on big rides, hundreds of kilometres a day, hours at a time through on major highways, you do need to have the proper safety gear. Now this is the safety gear that we recommend that you carry. Now the number one bit of gear that we recommend that you carry is a good quality helmet with a visor. We've bought this one from Australia, so it's an Australian standard helmet, really good quality. The next thing that you should be always wearing while you're on long rides is leg and arm guards. Now, we picked these leg and arm guards up from Hanoi. They weren't expensive, but they will protect your limbs in the event of a crash. They'll stop you from getting gravel rash all up and down your elbows and knees. You should be wearing a good pair of long pants. Finally, the last major thing we recommend that you carry is a good pair of leather gloves to help prevent your hands from getting hurt. So the next bit of safety equipment that you actually have control over is your bike. So whether you're renting a bike or buying a bike, it's important to check it and make sure that it's safe. Now, you need to check things like your lights, your indicators, check that your brakes work, check that the engine is running smoothly and it has a lot of power. And finally, there's the safety aspect that you can't control, which is the traffic around you. Now, in Southeast Asia, it isn't uncommon for trucks, buses, cars to overtake into your path, so they're coming straight at you. They're going to do it. If that happens, just get off the road, just let them pass, don't get angry about it, it's just the way of life over here. You also need to assume that out of every side road somebody will just come flying out without even looking. Buffaloes, chickens, dogs, kids, they're all going to run out onto the road in front of you. So just anticipate that, because it's not like back home. People don't people don't have the same mentality when they're riding or around roads as what they do back home. So you just need to expect the unexpected whenever you're riding. So now let's talk about how you actually get a bike. Now you've got a couple of options. You can either rent a bike or you can buy a bike. Now if you're just here short term, renting a bike is probably the best way to go. It's really easy to find them. Most hotels or travel agents, even restaurants, will rent a bike for around about $5 a day or about $50 a month. Now if you choose to buy a bike, you can buy one like the one that we've bought here. We bought this one for just over $300 US. You can pick them up anywhere between about $200 to around $500 US to get something decent. If you buy a Vietnamese plated bike, you can take it into Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam without any issues, so long as you've got the blue registration card. Now the disadvantage of owning your own bike, however, is that you do need to sell it at the other end of your trip. This can be time consuming, so if you're on a very tight time budget, it may just be more convenient to rent a bike. Now, whether you rent a bike or you buy a bike, there are some things that you're going to have to pay for. The main one being fuel, about 20,000 dong per litre, which is around about $1 a litre. Probably going to need to get it serviced if you're travelling a long way, so an oil change is normally around about 100,000 dong, or about $5. If you get punctures, a puncture should cost you around about 20,000 dong to fix, or if they need to replace the entire tube, it shouldn't be more than about 100,000 dong, so just keep those numbers in mind. We've had to replace our battery for about $30. We've replaced tyres, which are only about $25 each when we replace them. So it's very cheap to have a bike over here, and you're not likely to get ripped off by local mechanics. They're normally fairly trustworthy and reliable. So you need to take all that into account when you're trying to work out whether to rent a bike or whether to buy a bike, and what's going to be the most economical way for you, and whether you can be bothered selling it at the other end. Now, it is worth considering that if you want to go and buy a bike, make sure you do buy a bike that has Vietnamese plates and make sure it has the blue card that comes with it. This gives you the flexibility to go into other countries if you want to, and it makes it far easier to sell the bike at the other end as well. If it doesn't have those things on it, just don't even consider it. So now that you have your bike, you need to consider what route you want to take. Now, I won't go into huge amounts of detail in terms of the route, except to say that the Ho Chi Minh Highway is amazing, as well as the Ha Giang Loop. Ha Giang Loop's definitely been one of the best rides that we've ever done. Any of the roads in the mountains can be pretty spectacular. What I'll do is I'll leave a link down below to a blog written by a guy named Tom who lives in Vietnam, and he spends his free time travelling around Vietnam. We've used it and it's been absolutely spectacular in terms of getting routes. It's got information about how to get your bike on trains and ferries. If you want to know anything extra about motorcycling in Vietnam, that blog is probably going to have the information that you want to know. I will point out, in terms of roads to avoid, Highway 1 in Vietnam is incredibly dangerous. There are lots of trucks and buses, and they will basically brush past your shoulder as they're going past. Also, Highway 4 in Cambodia is probably the most dangerous road that I've ever ridden in my life. The trucks and buses on that road have like zero respect for anybody else on there, and they will push you off into the gravel. They'll overtake into your path with only a couple hundred meters before you need to get out off the road, and yeah, it's just not a very fun road to ride on. So finally, I just want to go over some common scams and issues that you might face when riding a motorbike in Vietnam. Now, the first one is actually a scam involving the police. Now, there's a town called Mui Ni, which is a coastal town near Ho Chi Minh City. It's well known for having very corrupt police that will pull over any foreign motorcyclist, and whether they are licensed or not, they'll fine them up to $200 US. Now, that's a huge fine. If you get pulled over without a license anywhere else in Vietnam, the fine's probably only going to be a maximum of $10. So they're basically just going out of their way to pull over tourists and fine them ridiculous amounts of money. The next scam actually involves renting motorbikes. Now, there's a couple of scams involving rentals. The first one is probably not as bad. It's basically when you come back, they'll try to hit you up for damages that were already on the bike. So just make sure that if you hire a bike that already has damages, that you list them out and make sure that they're aware of them before you take off with the bike. The second one, the more serious one, is that, and it's particularly prevalent in Laos, the rental company will hire the bike to you. If you're renting it for a couple of days, you'll take it back, you'll take it to your hotel, you'll leave it there overnight, and what will happen is overnight they will come with their spare key and they will steal the bike back off you. And then when you get up in the morning, you don't have a bike, you go back to them and they claim complete ignorance about it, and then you're up for the cost of a new bike because you can't prove that they've taken it. So that could potentially cost you thousands of dollars. So if you are going to rent a bike, consider investing in a wheel lock to make sure that the bike can't just be wheeled away or stolen. Finally, there's the petrol scams. So what happens with these petrol scams is that when they've filled up the bike before you, they don't reset the pump, and then they go to fill your bike up, and it might already be on 50 or 60,000 dong. So in the end, you can end up paying double for your fuel, because you're paying for your fuel as well as paying for the other people's fuel again as well. Easiest way to avoid this is always keep an eye on the meter. If the meter isn't reset to 0 before they start putting fuel in your tank, just put your hand over the top of the tank and just point to the meter, and they'll know that you're onto them, and they'll reset the meter and everything will be fine. Also, try to make sure that you have exact change for the petrol attendants. Most of them are completely fine. 99% of them are very honest, very reliable, but we have had a couple of times where people have tried to intentionally give us the wrong change back, and then they would argue with us when we tried to get the correct change back off them. So finally, just another couple of little tips and tricks. The first one is there's a couple of apps that you can download to make the travel easier. One of them is Google Maps Offline, and the other one is an app called Maps.me. Now, we haven't had huge success with Maps.me. It was a little bit unreliable for us in Laos, so we've relied almost entirely on Google Maps Offline. But it means you can download the Maps Offline, so you don't need to have an internet connection in order to be able to route where you want to go. The second thing is always carry a puncture repair kit with you, including a foot pump, and know how to use it. Now, we've been very lucky. We've had about half a dozen punctures on our trip, and it's almost always happened near a mechanic. But there's been plenty of times where we've been 20 minutes, half an hour away from a mechanic. If we had have got a puncture out there, and we didn't have things to repair it, we would have been stuffed. So you definitely need to carry one with you and know how to use it. And finally, it's important to consider travel times in Asia as well. So 100 kilometers might not seem like a lot back home, but here 100 kilometers is a few hours ride. Even if your bike can go easily at 60 kilometers an hour, by the time you've factored in brakes or traffic, things like that, you're probably only going to average about 30 to 40 kilometers an hour. So just keep that in mind when you're riding. It's really easy to get caught out and think that something's only going to take you a couple of hours and it ends up taking you 4. We've had days where we've gotten up at first thing in the morning and gotten on the bike, and we haven't pulled up to the next place until the sun's going down that night, or even worse, much later after the sun's gone down, and we've only gone a couple of 100 kilometers for the day. So yeah guys, riding a motorbike in Asia can be one of the most rewarding things that you'll do on your trip away. It's an adventure that you're probably going to remember for the rest of your life, and if you can, we highly recommend doing it. It's certainly been one of the highlights of our trip while we've been away. We've avoided sitting on so many trains, planes and buses just because we bought our motorbike, and we've been able to have such a huge amount of freedom. So yeah, we hope you guys found this useful. If you have any other questions about riding a motorbike in Vietnam or Laos or Cambodia, pop it in the comments below and I'll try to answer it as best as I can. If you did like the video, don't forget to hit that like button down below, and definitely subscribe because we have heaps more videos coming up from Asia, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye!